The trouble with Andy Dick and his plunge into the dark side of fame, well, it began long before headlines revealed that he'd been arrested in Santa Barbara, California on felony burglary charges after allegedly entering a home under construction and stealing multiple power tools. Yeah, his career's gone that bad. Hell, it began long before the more recent news that he's been forced to register as a sex offender and sentenced to 90 days in jail for inappropriately groping an Uber driver. But I gotta say, well, that last one, well, it's more in keeping with his usual MO. Now, stealing something, it might be a brand new offense for Dick, but groping is most definitely not. And if he's having problems keeping his hands to himself, well, he's probably somewhere out there in La La Land urinating where he shouldn't be or exposing himself in crowded spaces. We got lots to cover. Now, in some ways, well, Andy Dick's fall from grace is a tragic chain of events that brought down a once promising comic who was heralded by Time magazine as one of the most talented, gutsy, and truly strange comics of his generation. In other ways, well, controversy and Andy Dick, they become such common bedfellows that it's impossible to expect anything else from this dude. To be fair, he's actually turned out to be one giant dick. And I mean, like, he chose Chris Farley as his AA sponsor, of all people. We'll get into that in just a second. You see, as Andy's star rose in Hollywood thanks to his presence in cult classic television series The Ben Stiller Show and news radio, well, so did his seemingly endless appetite for anything narcotic or intoxicating. Now, the next clip, I doubt I can even show you, but well, it's Andy doing drugs live while on Twitch. It's gotten that low. Now, at first, the task of keeping Andy clean fell on his good friend Chris Farley. Now, we all know Chris, he had his own demons to battle, but according to reports, well, he was also Dick's AA sponsor. Now, tragically, neither of these two would wind up being able to escape the clutches of addiction. Now, Andy Dick's downfall, it began in December of 1997, and that's when two events took place in such close proximity that they would alter the course of his life forever. Now, with news radio being in the midst of its fourth season, well, Andy's sobriety, it was already a thing of the past as he reveled in the trappings of fame. And honestly, well, Chris Farley, he was doing much of the same thing. Then on December 18th, 1997, well, Andy's good friend, well, he would die of cocaine and morphine overdose in his Chicago apartment. And this sent the entire comedy world into shock. Like, fuck, man. Just last year I did Chris Farley's Gone video. People are still talking about it. Now, shortly after Farley's death, well, Andy, he attended a Christmas party at the house of his friend and news radio co-star Phil Hartman. Now, Phil's wife, Bryn, she was a recovering drug addict who had nearly a decade of sobriety under her belts. But it all ended that night when Andy showed up, and well, according to actor and comedian John Lovitz, Bryn relapsed that night with cocaine supplied to her by Andy Dick. And from that point forward, well, she continued to fall off the wagon, and 5 months later, well, Bryn, she murdered Phil while high on cocaine. And that's before she took her own life.
As they were taking the children out of the house, officers heard a gunshot in the master bedroom. There they discovered comedian Phil Hartman dead. Authorities say it appears his wife Bryn shot him, then turned the gun on herself.
Now, Lovitz, he would replace Hartman on news radio, but the show, it couldn't survive the loss of its biggest star. And from there, well, NBC, they ended the series after the finale of the following season. Now, during the taping of one of the final episodes, well, Andy Dick, he told Lovitz, "You shouldn't be here," to which Lovitz replied, "Well, I wouldn't be here if you hadn't given Bryn coke in the first place." Now, the shocking death of two of his closest friends sent Dick on a downward spiral that would see things go from bad to worse. Now, less than a year after Hartman's death, well, Andy and his friend and fellow actor David Strickland flew from LA to Vegas intent on spending a 3-day bender, partying in various strip clubs. But on the morning of March 22nd, 1999, well, an intoxicated Strickland would hang himself from the ceiling beam of his motel room. A short 2 months later, Andy was arrested for what would become the first of many times, when on May 15th, 1999, he crashed his car into a utility pole, leading to his arrest and conviction on felony cocaine possession, as well as 2 marijuana-related misdemeanors. Now, the judge would eventually dismiss those charges once Dick completed an 18-month drug division program. But hey, we're just getting started, or Dick is. Following this wake-up call, well, Andy managed to stay out of trouble long enough to star in his own MTV series, The Andy Dick Show. Now, this ran in total for 3 seasons from 2001 to 2002. Now, for that one shining moment, it seemed like Andy Dick, well, he might have righted the course of his career. But, well, that is before he got very, very handsy. In the aftermath of his MTV series, Andy was arrested in 2004 for indecent exposure after reportedly mooning the customers of an LA McDonald's. Innocent enough, I suppose, but it marked the beginning of a pattern of disturbing behavior that would eventually escalate to a full-on assault. For instance, during the 2005 Comedy Central roast of Pamela Anderson, Dick, who had been invited to perform that night, he moved behind the former Baywatch star and grabbed her chest while making some, fairly rudimentary plastic surgery jokes. Nowadays, they'd arrest the man for this. Back then, I don't even know how they got away with it. Now, he then moved on to moving to grope Courtney Love, who slapped him away in retaliation. Now, these would become just the first of Dick's on-air assaults. 2 years later, Andy would forcibly be removed from Jimmy Kimmel Live after repeatedly grabbing the bare leg of the United States' future first daughter, Ivanka Trump.
Kimmel tries to bring order to the situation.
Donald Trump will kill both of us.
Then in 2007, Andy would have another run-in with John Lovitz, knowing full well that Lovitz held him responsible for what happened to Phil Hartman and his wife. When Andy saw John at the restaurant in Los Angeles, he approached his former friend and said, "I put the Phil Hartman hoax on you, you're the next to die." My God. Oh, LA, you know what I mean? You want to see celebrities, but you don't want to see a guy who's got a hex on you, for sure. Then later that year, Lovitz would confront Dick at the Laugh Factory in Los Angeles, where he smashed Andy's head against the bar top several times before the two men were pulled apart.
You said he slammed your head against the bar.
Yeah, but he didn't even make it down to the bar, and I don't want to talk about him.
Rather than smarten up after this widely publicized spat, Andy, he only got worse. Now, in 2008, he was arrested for drug possession and sexual battery. That's after drunkenly pulling down the shirt and undergarments of a 17-year-old girl outside of Buffalo Wild Wings. Now, with this being as serious a situation as it was, Dick would plead guilty to misdemeanor charges, but it was still only sentenced to 3 years probation for all that. And I mean, this girl's underage. Also, poor Wild Wings. They don't deserve the bad credit. You know what I mean? You don't want to be associated with that filth. Now, 2 years later, Andy was arrested on sexual abuse charges at a bar in Huntington, Virginia, for allegedly grabbing the bouncer's junk and then proceeding to force himself on a patron at the establishment. Now, his legal team, they worked their magic once again, and the charges, they were dismissed after Andy, he completed a 6-month pre-trial diversion program. Now, all of this bad behavior, it seemed to be building towards something, and in 2011, Andy, he got into so many altercations that I just simply don't have time to go through all of them, but here are a few of the headlines. Now, for one, he was accused of groping and stalking performers at the Adult Entertainment AVN Awards. He then drunkenly exposed himself by urinating on the backdrop at the Newport Film Festival. And for an encore performance, Dick, he launched a very ugly anti-Semitic tirade against Howard Stern.
You hook-nosed Jew. He's used to it. He can handle it.
He gets called that quite a bit.
Yeah, I know. I didn't.
Yeah, I get called that quite a bit, especially behind my back.
And that's just the stuff that made the news. Now, throughout the 2010s, Andy was absolutely notorious all around LA for his altercations with dozens, if not hundreds of individuals, which created stories that were passed around like urban legends. For instances, the Upright Citizens Brigade comedy troupe, they used to begin their LA shows by asking the audience 2 questions. Now, first they'd inquire by a show of hands if anyone in the audience had ridden an elephant before. Then they'd ask everyone to raise their hands if they had received unwanted sexual advances from Andy Dick. The second group was always larger than the first. Yeah, that shows you, right? It's like half the population of LA and people visiting. Ugh. Now, you might think with all the endless controversies continually throwing his life off the tracks that Andy Dick would eventually get wise, start slowing down. But in the past few years and the 5th decade of his life on this planet, he's proven that there's no stopping him. Them hands, they won't stop. For a brief period of time in the mid-2010s, Dick did get sober after entering rehab for what he claims was like the 20th time. But there was a bunch of extenuating circumstances, not the least of which was the fact that his own son, he became hooked on speed. Now, recognizing that he finally had to set an example, Dick, he entered a brief period of clarity, but unfortunately, it wouldn't last.
It's too much. It's too much. I wish I had stopped in my early 20s when I was just getting going.
Following the death of his brother in 2016, Dick's sobriety, it dried up. Then in 2017, he was fired from a movie for allegedly grabbing, groping, and yes, even licking large portions of the entire cast and crew. He denied those accusations, but he looked pretty stupid when he was then let go from yet another film for allegations that were basically a carbon copy of what had happened only a few weeks prior.
Really, that's like the extent that I do, and then they're like, you need to get off the fucking set.
Yeah, well, you know, grabbing people's genitals is kind of like, it really takes like somebody like me that is kind of like, you know, doesn't give like two or three fucks that much. But most people would think that's a big no-no.
Now, a year later, the Hollywood Reporter, they would report that Andy had been charged with 1 count of sexual battery and 1 count of simple battery after a woman alleged that he had squeezed her backside while he walked past her on the street. That's right, literally everyone's up for grabs in Andy's world. Then in 2019, Dick, he assaulted an Uber driver, grabbing them by the genitals. Now, Dick would plead not guilty to this charge, but, we're going to stick a pin in that story because it comes back in a big way.
Is this select?
Oh no, this is pool.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Because I select you.
In the 2020s, Dick's behavior only got worse. Not only did he get in a series of altercations with his boyfriend throughout 2021, allegedly assaulting him with everyday household items. We're talking a folding chair, a frying pan, even a liquor bottle. By the end of the year, he had been forced out of his apartment, and he was living in a $20 a night RV out in Southern California. Now, around that same time, he had a near-death experience when he overdosed on a lethal amount of fentanyl, thinking that the drug was cocaine. Now, had his friend not been with him when this happened, well, Andy Dick, he wouldn't even be with us right now. That's right, he was that close.
So they told me when I came back to life, if they weren't there, I would not have come back to life. One of them kept running down to the tent people outside my apartment building to get, what's it called, Narcan?
Yeah.
And with Hollywood no longer wanting anything to do with him, Dick, he was seemingly attempting to carve out a new career for himself by hanging out with a series of under-the-radar streamers. Oftentimes, he would crash at their homes, and he would create troubling content that bridged the line between reality and fiction. For instance, in April of 2022, Dick, he was visited by Las Vegas police officers after one of these individuals pulled out a firearm during a live stream and began threatening someone else. 1 month later, Dick would be arrested on sexual battery charges after a male streamer he had been staying with told authorities that he was an alleged victim of assault. Now, the arrest, it was even streamed on YouTube from the RV campground where Dick had been living. But later that month, the investigation was called off after the alleged victim, he refused to cooperate with the police, throwing into question whether this was an actual crime or just a poorly thought out publicity stunt. Then in October of 2022, Dick was arrested in Santa Barbara, this time for stealing power tools from a home that was under construction. And while he was eventually released on $50,000 bail, remember that accusation from before with the Uber driver? Well, in November of 2022, all of Dick's former sins came home to roost. He was sentenced to 90 days in jail as a result of that charge. More than just jail time, Dick, he'll have to serve 12 months in summary probation while also completing a series of mental health counseling and sexual compulsion sessions. Oh, and thanks to the nature of the crime, he's also gonna have to register as a sex offender in the state of California. My God, I know he'll just beeline to Vegas, but still, it's something. Now, one of the saddest things about this whole case is that for everything Andy Dick has done wrong, and it's a lot, he's not totally lacking in self-awareness, as he himself told Vice. People think I'm just a f*** up who never tried. I deserve it. I really do. That's the sad part. Whatever comes my way in terms of public humiliation, I brought it upon myself. I'll never outrun people's negative expectations of me in my whole lifetime. Talk about flushing your whole life down the drain. Now, addiction, it's an insidious disease, and Andy Dick, he spent the better part of his life fighting it. Now, the problem is that, he's failed more times than not, and absolving him of some of this horrendous behavior simply because he says he won't do it, I just don't think that's enough for most people. Now, maybe one day Andy's sobriety will finally stick, but if the past is any indication of the future for Andy Dick, I'm hesitant to believe that, that'll ever be the case. Until then, Andy needs to continue being held accountable for actions that simply aren't acceptable, not only by today's standards, but by any point throughout modern history. You can't just grab a woman on the street. I guess maybe way back. But come on, dude. It's post-COVID. follow the rules. I know comedy is about pushing boundaries, I truly believe that, but what Andy Dick's been doing for the past 3 decades, well, it stopped being funny a very long time ago. I got a question for you guys. I want to hear your answers in the comments down below. Knowing what you do about the death of Phil Hartman, do you hold Dick in any way responsible, or was it out of his control? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. My name, of course, is Michael McCrudden. This is Before They Were Famous, but today we just did the Dark Side of Fame, featuring Andy Dick. And I don't know if it's going to get any darker than that. That's probably the ugliest story we've ever told. Anyways, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.